I'm David Guderian, and this is the Flip Story. Today, I'm excited to explore a flip space, specifically AI, and even more specifically, voice. Talking with a guy who went from drowning in AI tools to writing the book on how to actually use them. Today's guest is Chris Hensley, CEO of Houston First Financial Group, host of the Money Matters podcast with over 300 episodes, and he's out with a new book, Digital Kaizen, a systems guy at heart that found himself drowning in digital chaos. Chris, welcome to the show.
David, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
All right. Well, we're excited to have you. I gotta be honest. I'm gonna blow a little bit of some of the questions we're gonna get into a little bit later, but I'm a big fan of voice. We're gonna have maybe I didn't share that with you up until now, but we're gonna have a
Oh,
few
yeah.
things to talk about as we kind of get through it all. But
I love it.
let's yeah. So let's kind of just real quick. I know I shared a little bit of your background, but maybe just to kind of ground set, do you mind kind of going through your now? What are you up to right now, just to kind of orient the audience on who you are and what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wear multiple hats. The book, Digital Kaizen, that's all about voice AI and voice interaction and stuff. That's one hat, and that's kind of a passion project, right?
Right.
My main paying gig is I'm a financial advisor. I've been in the financial advisor space for over 22 years. And I have one of the longest, my podcaster hat, I've got one of the longest running financial retirement shows out there. Money Matters. I've been doing podcasting for over a decade, so I think it's year 13 now.
Wow.
And so I'm one of the people that originally started the Money Matters show. Started as a live radio show on KPFT Houston 90.1, so terrestrial radio, live. So we didn't have post production. So we didn't have like, hold on, let me go back and
Right.
edit it. It was literally keep it going, right? But when I started doing that show, it was every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Um, Somebody told me, that you have a byproduct of an MP3 and you could do something with this. And this is when podcasting just was starting to hit the air. So, we predated Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss and all of that. And so I started putting the podcast out into the world through Libsyn and iTunes. I think I'm dating myself because it was iTunes back then on Apple. And sure enough, we would see these on these blister maps, people from all over the world
Huh.
tuning in. And we eventually got more listeners outside of the Houston area than we did here in Houston, which was just super exciting for me. I was like, okay, I could see on the blister map where people are tuning in. And it became a thing. And so now, I look back and we've had, many New York Times bestselling authors on the show, many people that I never would have thought that I would be talking to on the other side of the microphone. And now I'm like, wow, really, really neat. And I've been able to kind of leverage the experience of interviewing these people who've written books and then turn around and write a book on my own. Say, okay, what did they do that I could turn around and use for that process?
Right.
So that part of it's been thankful that I've been able to use that experience. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So you're one of the originals. You were kind of in this space before it kind of firmed up, and you
Yep.
know
Yep.
it's neat to think about when you kind of you realize how big the world is. I mean, when you talk about those blister maps and just the concept of suddenly you're way outside of your own space, you're interacting with folks that they're not in your proximity. They're connecting with you on a topical basis, and they could be from anywhere in the world that have interest in that topic. It's pretty fascinating, and that gets us into some of the noise and some of the chaos that we're going to be talking about here. But I think we're going to kind of come around it in a little bit of a roundabout way. I wanted to ask you something specific in your background.
Yeah.
Um, and it spoke to me in a lot of ways. I didn't totally understand it. Also, I want to be upfront. You position yourself as a systems guy. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I am very much somebody who efficiency, productivity, systems, right? Think of all of the books on tape that you've listened to your entire life. Right? I probably have listened to all of those, um, this started out with best practices, and I think back to David Allen's, the physical to do baskets. Okay, this is
Hmm.
something that we're going to do. This is something we're going to delegate. This is something we're going to discard. Right.
Yeah.
Um, that all of those different efficiency systems over my life have come into play, but only about 3 of them stuck, if I'm being honest. Like,
Right.
I look back and I say, "Okay, out of all of these different systems that I've used, which ones were the ones that kinda boiled to the top?" And those are the ones that made the cut for Digital Kaizen.
Right.
The ones that I call the 3 pillars in the book, that's gonna be the actual, uh, the, the second brain is one of them. Tiago Forte has made that one famous, really, but it wasn't just him, right? The
Right.
idea of the brain operates. It's great for creativity. It's great for thinking. Not so great as a storage cabinet, right? We can literally hold about 5 to 7 things at once, and the idea of having systems in place to capture our best thoughts, that one stuck with me.
Right.
The extended mind, that's the other pillar. That's the idea that a lot of our best thinking comes outside of our brain. When we're driving, I'm somebody that a lot of the book was actually happened by me having conversations and recording with AI,
Yep.
with digital recorders, with voice journaling in my truck on the way out to my property, about 2.5 hours outside of Houston. There's a lot of drive time there,
Yeah.
walking with my family, having dialogues like we're having a dialogue right now, having dialogues with more than one person. That conversation ends up evolving into something that it wasn't when it was just in your head, right? Um, that's the idea of the extended mind, that thinking doesn't just happen inside of your brain. And then finally, Kaizen, the idea of continual growth, personal growth, iteration. Those 3 concepts stuck out of all of the different,
Hmm.
ideas and systems that I've run into over my entire life. And they didn't really gel until we sprinkled AI on top of it.
All right. I want to
And
ask a
yeah,
question before we get there, though,
yep, yep,
on this kind of whole journey of systems thinking,
yeah.
systems philosophy. Were you the kind of person who if you didn't have a good system in place, you'd struggle?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I didn't even come into this. Was mind blowing for me to, I think, the Checklist Manifesto, which is a book about to-do list, right? Having a checklist before you sit down, like a good surgeon goes from A to B, and it's okay to go through a checklist, right?
Right.
When I started in college, just the transition from high school to college, that was the idea of capturing the thoughts that are in our head and putting them on paper, and just being able to go, here's step one, here's step two, here's step three.
Hmm.
That was a game changer for me. And I know it's for people who use to-do lists all the time, that's intuitive. They're like, oh, okay, I know to do that, right? But
Yeah.
for people that are constantly coming up with ideas, um, if you don't capture them, they're lost, right? Some of your best ideas happen while you're in the shower, maybe. It's like, oh, I
Right.
forgot that one, right? Immediately when I got out of the shower. So the idea of having a system, a to-do list in place, when I didn't have that, I was lost. I was drowning. It was too much information for me, right?
Right.
Um, Having something like that helps me focus and help me dial in some of my best thoughts.
Okay. Note taker, big note taker, or kind of
Huge,
casual? Yeah.
huge note taker, right? And so starting with just being somebody who captured everything in a physical journal, right? Tactile,
Right.
like writing it down in a
That's what was
journal.
available.
That's what we had, and so for many years, that was what I did. I would say even obsessive note taker, right? Just
Right.
constantly writing, sitting in meetings with clients over the past
Hmm.
22 years, making sure I was active listening and writing. And Then when the AI note takers came out
Yeah.
and we started using them, I went back to some of the the notes that I've taken over the years. And I said, man, I can't even read these. There's one or two words in there that I put in there that was supposed to be a trigger to remind me later on. I was like, what the hell was
Yeah.
I talking about? Right. So
Oh, jeez.
if you look at the outputs from some of the AI note takers, they're really damn good, right?
Yeah.
Yes, like yeah,
This is
yeah,
chaos.
yeah, mind mapping and flow charts and all of that. I've done a little bit of everything, and it's not that that stuff's bad. And you know, if it, honestly, if you can get like one or two keywords that will trigger a
Yeah.
thought. But what I found out after I introduced the AI note takers in my business, and this book, Digital Kaizen, that starts in my personal life, right?
Right.
But what I did is I brought AI into the business for 2 years. I went and got, data analytics certified through Vanderbilt. I got prompt engineering certified through Vanderbilt. I had my assistant certified in both of those. And we kinda went full force into the AI stuff, and the AI note takers were, game changers for us. The
Yeah.
idea it allowed us to be more of an active listener because we weren't bogged in trying to capture every single detail for the clients, and it allowed us to go back and mine those outputs for the most meaningful connections. And that's the thing. When you hear AI, you think, okay, robots, and we're not being human.
Right.
But I was allowed to find the strongest emotional pieces of that conversation. And maybe when I was in that conversation, I didn't realize that it was about long term care or somebody putting their aunt into a nursing home. But then when you go back and you look, it's like, man, I missed that. And so the
Right.
next time you talk to that client, you can connect with them and ask them on that. That was the business part of it, and it had tremendous for somebody who was a solo entrepreneur who had one assistant, like a team of two.
Yeah.
Um, it was a game changer for me. So Digital Kaizen, the book, I asked, well, what if I invite this into my personal life? Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of awesome. So you're sitting there, you're at work, you're kind of going through this journey like everybody. And I think if you're like everybody, and I understand you kind of get into this, the AI discovery is both chaotic, it's filled with hope and promise. Voice, I think, is really neat. Um, there's the words, of course. Then there's also tone, and there's intent, and then you can start to get into video, and you can start to pick up a lot of signals to help facilitate kind of what's actually happening. I remember years and years ago, I this was kind of early internet. I was starting to do some research for a potential job, and it was about video intent, and it got into
Yes.
like hidden algorithms. I think they were called hidden Markov models, HMMs. It was really kind of fascinating. I ended up I didn't get that gig, so I kind of moved on. But it was a real kind of early moment of wow. There's like a lot that as humans we know is happening, but and I think you're absolutely right in that your ability to hold information for an extended period of time, it's not really how people operate, right? We're always kind of in the moment. And so we might even recognize some of those signals as they're happening, but it may not be the most resonant. And you're absolutely right that you move on. So that's neat that you kind of managed to play in that space. So as you're kind of going through that, is this kind of like eureka, aha, holy Toledo, or is this a slow discovery, or is this kind of a series of frustrations that you're building towards to start to get to maybe a more cogent thesis?
I would say a little bit of everything, but mostly a eureka moment, right?
Yeah.
I feel like you know how you invent something and then somebody comes along and puts a kickstand on it. I kind of feel like that a little bit because it's like, all right, these ideas were out there already, but the idea of putting AI on top of it and then leading with voice first. So voice first, voice is the absolute fastest way to interact with computers. It is very much faster than typing. You know, we grew up in a generation where we learned to type as fast as we could. But what happens when you're typing, you're literally editing yourself. You know, you've got spell check. You're before it makes it onto the paper or to the email, you're sitting there and kind of you've got that editor in your head editing some
Mhm.
of your best thoughts. Voice is more open to, if we just capture our voice, the editor disappears. Now, that doesn't mean everything that we're putting on there is gold, right? We're going to
Right.
have to go back and mine the gold out of it. But some of the most honest and deep insights that you'll come up with are voice. And if you capture them raw data, it gives you the opportunity to go back and mine, right? So that capturing your voice is the first step of this system that I put together for Digital Kaizen, going back and reflecting, and what I call the loop or the long loop, going back, reflecting, and then pulling out those insights, those nuggets from your life. It's not the AI that's so impressive, although AI is awesome. It's like a huge pattern
Yeah.
recognition. It's really, really good at that. The things that are most impressive to me are the things that are already present in our life, our voice, what we already have, those things that make us human, and then finding them and mining them. So maybe it wasn't that business conversation I had. Maybe it was that conversation I had with my son in the kitchen before we left to go to school, that 5 minute quick thing I didn't notice. But so I'm using this wearable. I've got an Omi wearable
I
that's
was gonna
capturing
ask. Yep.
all the
Okay.
audio right now. When I wrote the book back in May of last year, this is constantly evolving, right? So there was a bracelet called BAI, and I was using that one, and that one was an ambient voice recorder, so it was on all the time,
Yep.
and it was picking up everything. Now, there are some. I write a blog piece called Digital Kaizen. It's blog, and it's kind of, it's still diving deep into this voice AI interaction there. And I've since then kind of changed my thinking. I've came up with something called signal curation, where I'm not, there were problems with ambient recording, right? When we mentioned earlier the noise, if you record all the time, you're picking up all of the television shows, the podcasts that we're listening to all the time,
Right.
and so you're having to go back and kind of get rid of some of the noise, you know. So signal curation is the idea of, when do we want to be recording? And so
Mhm.
it's being with intent, knowing when you're turning on the recorder. And then I keep a hard firewall between my business life and my personal life. I use Firefly's AI to record all of my business meetings, and it's
Right.
really good. And then for my personal life, I'm using Omi right now. And this one, some of the things I like about it is it has data sovereignty. It has the ability for me to own the data. I'm a cheap ass. Can I say that on the air? So, I don't know if I'm okay to say. So I'm probably
You
one of the
can.
most frugal people you'll ever meet. Seriously. So,
It would make sense given
yeah.
some of
So
your financial background and a lot of what you
super
preach. So,
cheap.
yep.
Frugal is
Uh-huh.
being nice, right? So, BAI, when it came out, it was $40 for a bracelet, right? And it recorded. It didn't cost anything after that. There was no ongoing subscription rate. And so I was, oh, this is great. You know, this is for
Right.
what it does. You know, to share with listeners that for somebody who's busy, it captures to-dos. If you say, "Hey, I gotta, take my mom to the doctor's appointment, or I've got my son to drop him off here," well, it downloads it in your phone. You have a to-do list with a date and a time. That alone is just like mind-blowing. It's
Right.
life-changing, right? Unfortunately, they got by Amazon,
Right.
and then the question became, okay, where's my data? Now they are saying that it's not with Amazon, that this is kind of like a separate thing, but and then they gave up on the Android platform, and so I was an Android user. So then I switched over to Omi. Omi is very open architecture, but it allows us to do things like data sovereignty, where we can like host our own data on an NAS, and then not have to worry about other companies owning our most intimate moments, right? So,
Right.
but this was something I learned post book. The book, you don't have to get into the weeds on that. Just know that one of the things that we recommend for listeners is, if you want to just start recording, just use your voice recorder on your phone. Download, a 4 minute uh, voice journal a week, and then go back, put the transcripts into an LLM, and ask, what patterns am I missing? What things am I not talking about that I need to talk about? Um,
Right.
that's the easy breezy way to do it. You don't even need to read the book for that. You can get the app, do it, and that makes sense. But, yeah,
I love it. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. All right. I want to ask you a different question, just related totally. So
yeah,
for me, I find when I write things, I tend to recall them the most. When I
yes,
type things, it's the most digitized. I would say I'm not a voice native at this point.
yeah, yeah.
Um, do you what I'm presuming you're gonna say voice is the thing that gives you the most resonance, the most recall, but
You'd
I don't know,
think
what's your
that. So,
perspective on it? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So when I was in college, I did a deep dive into accelerated learning.
Yeah,
And everybody's style of learning is different. And so whether you're auditory, whether you do kinetic or whether you have to write it out, right? I actually was one of these people. So my wife, she could go read a book, walk in the next day, take a test cold and get an A, right? I had to say it out loud, write it down, maybe I'd get a B, right?
right,
But I do lean heavily on the auditory. I mean, I think that's between doing the podcasts for many
right,
years and just being somebody who's very verbal. I'm a public speaker. I do a lot of talks. That is my medium. That's the place I feel most comfortable with. But on the other hand, for that recall and being able to sit, the physical act of writing it out and the connection between the paper and the pen, that does reinforce it. So it's not I wouldn't say it's a substitute for
right.
that. But on the other hand, now if you lean heavy to auditory, it'll fit naturally. Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of those things that, people are more likely to know how to talk than versus writing. This
Yeah.
just on a baseline level,
Yeah.
there's not I don't think I'm saying anything controversial there of like the barrier to entry of being able to talk is much lower than being able to write.
I 100% agree with that. And I think I'm 52. I think if I look at even the idea of podcasting, right? The idea of being able to on demand pick up something that you want to hear and hit pause and listen to it at the gym, right? This is something that hasn't been online forever, at least not my entire lifetime. But I think
Yeah,
we've been trained to move towards this, and we have Alexa, and we've got all of these. I'm afraid to say it, and my kid could turn on here. We've got all of these voice driven technologies now, so I think I think we're being kind of pushed in that direction, but in a positive way.
right. And I think some of that has to do with just the depth of digital overall. You went from, I have a whole theory on this. I won't bore you with it, but the basics are you went from caveman painting
Yeah.
to then eventually you got to the printing press and eventually you got to these little boxes or these really big boxes that would record video and make movies, and now that's been totally compressed into everybody's an auteur, and so natively, you're I think you're right that we've been going down this path of learning how to access video, how to access sound. We have possession of those that we've never before had. That used to be like I'm about your age, that
Yeah.
it was, like, so rare to see a family video when we
Right.
were little kids, and then you got the VHS. Camcorder was a little more normalized, but still pretty rare. It wasn't like it took a while for every family to have something like that or anyone who wanted it, to now, abundance,
It's
mass abundance.
everywhere. Yep,
Yep,
yep, and it's on demand, and my 15-year-old's like, "Did y'all used to sit through these commercials?" Because like,
right.
yeah, we didn't have a choice. If we wanted to watch Saturday morning cartoons, we had to sit through the
It
commercials.
was part of the deal,
Yeah,
yes.
it's just part of it's the cost of doing business, right?
I love it. So what made you decide you wanted to go out and actually write about all this? So I get the interest, I get the passion, I get the logic of kind of where you're playing, but to take that step, this is a degree of motivation that that's pretty significant.
Yeah, so I think I really found something here that's set out that's kind of it's AI, right? It's AI related, but there's not a whole bunch of stuff where people have gone into the voice part of it. There's companies, and I'm got my finger on the pulse there for the
Yeah.
companies that are in this space, but there's not a lot of books that have been written about voice first AI. And so I don't just talk about the AI aspects of it. I talk about finding your voice, our human voice, and kind of the idea of one of the things that people are weary of is AI taking away meaning.
Right.
A lot of you go on LinkedIn and you see these articles that have been written by AI, and as they call it, AI slop, right? Like
Right.
everything starts looking the same. And so it's not just about auditory voice, it's also about keeping your meaning. There's a lot of things that we can delegate to AI as AI comes on board. It's a game changer. It's a huge thing. You can't delegate meaning. And
Right.
so using AI to help us find meaning and mine our own personal meaning is is something that I think is unique. It's a different way to look at it. And what the book offers and what I offers is a system to do that, a way to break that noise, that overload, that fear of missing out. Well, there's all this AI technology. Which one's the best one? Some of the things I've written into the Digital Kaizen blog are making your meaning portable. So, this is a tip that I give users of AI is putting together a document that has everything that you want to communicate to AI. Um, and I call this a context map, right?
Yeah.
Um, I was when Chrome brought on we're moving from the LLMs being off of the computer to them being embedded in our browsers now. That's one of the next big moves. We've already seen it. And I was able to take Chrome's new browser one, pull it up. I had it pull that document, and then I had it read an email. Now this wasn't a client email for compliance stuff. Right?
Right.
This was a third party like sales email,
Just an
and
email. Sure.
I had it read the email and answer it in my voice, and I didn't really have to do anything because I already had like a 19-page document that says, "Hey, this is how I think. These are the exceptions to my thinking." Now, that you don't have to do this, but the idea is, if you do something like this, as technology changes, who's the last man standing between Claude and ChatGPT and like all of the different LLMs
Right.
doesn't really matter if you embrace it and you bring the meaning to it. And that's part of what one of the arguments I have in the book. And we've got a lot of different things in there, guardrails that we should put up to make sure we don't lose our voice. AI needs to be a friendly co-pilot. We are all humans are always in charge. That's an important thing. I'm Gen X, so the way I talk about it is, this can go two ways, right? It's either going to be your Terminator 2 dystopia type deal. We don't want that. Or you've
Right.
got your Star Wars with you've got R2D2 as your friendly sidekick. Now I'm rooting very hard for R2D2, but I am a realist. We have as Gen X, we've come from. We know we've got to be weary of this. I watched a documentary recently, the AI movie that came out, and they talked about there only being of all the companies that are working on AI, there's only about 200 people on the planet that are professionally somebody who gets paid to deal with AI ethics, right? And so if we
Right.
think about bioscience and stuff when we need bioethics, right? The train's already left the station, and if we don't want to prevent bad things, that's an area we need to focus on. And I write about that in the book as well as guardrails, things we need to look out for. Yeah,
Love it. And I love that you came back on the systems concept because I think that seems to be part of the underlying thesis of your book is to have a system regardless of who the provider is. I think there's a lot of merit to that, and I do think
absolutely.
there's a ton of merit to grounding some of that strategy around voice of how you can utilize voice, how you can communicate through voice, how you can utilize AI with a voice lens to really kind of elevate what you're trying to do. And I do agree with you also, by the way, that a lot of this narrative, I don't know that we're quite done with the fear narrative around AI. it's probably got some legs, and we're probably going to have some shocking discoveries. But I do think, to your comment just a minute ago, that the idea of AI as an aid rather than as a competitor to who we are is probably more likely going to be the winning kind of end game.
That's where I see it going, and if it doesn't go that way, then we all got a bigger problem. So,
Right.
I'm rooting very hard for that. So no, I've embraced it. In fact, the book, besides it being a passion project, I open with being starting as a child, as a kid. I was somebody who didn't get picked for PE. I wasn't very athletic.
Okay.
My idea of having a good time was sitting around on my Commodore 64, right? So a bit of a digital obsessive from go. And my mom was a COBOL programmer, right? So I talk about that in the book. And so when I kind of stumbled upon the combination of all of these things, it was kind of a going back, right? It was going back to the idea of being a digital obsessive as a kid,
Right.
and then finding this. It's kind of like the technology caught up. Yeah.
Do you think without having that, so your mom was a cobalt coder, as you just
Mhm.
said. Um, you were a early digital native on the Commodore 64 and
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
have you.
Yeah.
Do you think without that background you still would have been as predisposed to writing this book, or do you think it was your fascination with sound and you're talking about books on tape and
Yeah,
kind of
so there was
things?
kind of the
Go
marriage of
ahead.
those 2 things, right? That digital obsessiveness of the Commodore 64, but then also, audio. I was another nerdy kid thing, right? Going around with a
Hmm.
voice recorder, recording everything all the time,
Yeah.
and I like, experimental music, noise music, things that typically people didn't find as music, but, like,
Right.
those things interested me, so later in life when I had, to have a profession. So the idea of bringing in a voice recorder to client meetings, doctors did that, attorneys did that, financial advisors do that. Um, it
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't out of the norm to do that, and I did that for many years. Um, but it wasn't what this is, right? So just recording it, that's the first step of the system is to capture, store it. We got that part down, but then to reflect on it. And so reflecting on it, that's the loop.
Right.
Reflecting on it is with AI, which is such a great pattern recognition engine. It is able to do it in a much better way than we can. I think when there was a program called Dragon Speak many years ago that was a transcription thing, it
Yep.
didn't work very well. I had very high hopes for it,
I
but
did too. I
you,
actually
you,
got Dragon from my dad because I
oh,
wanted
nice.
to get him onto his computer that he refused to actually use, and he was like, "I am not typing. I don't know what you're
Yes.
talking about." I'm like, "You know what? Just talk to the damn thing." And we got
Right.
it, and I'm
Right.
with you of like, it had so
Yeah.
much promise. It was just a little ahead of its time.
Yeah, yeah, and then you would have to talk to it for like 2.5 hours, and maybe you'd get about 20% of it right. We are
Right.
now at a point where, the apps that are on the phone are damn good transcribers. I mean, there's Whisper that's out there. You can turn on there's a feature on Windows now that I end up injuring my hand, so now I have to type one-handed, so I was like, "Alright, I'm going full force into the voice thing." So
Yep.
there's actually an app that you could push on there for Windows that will make it easier to do voice recognition. All of those things work better than what Dragon Speak was like many years ago, right? We're at a
Right.
different space and time, place and time.
Totally. Totally. It's neat though. I'm with you though on the early vision of what was potential there, and
Right.
if I recall, like Dragon started to riff a little. They got into medical was kind of
I
the next
think
lane
that
that they picked.
I think that's right.
They
Yeah,
went from
yeah,
general to medical, but anyways, my dad wasn't a doctor. He was just some
yes.
guy. So, well, that's neat. So I did want to ask you about one other thing because you
Yeah.
shared it with me, and it feels very much you. And you mentioned you shared kind of coming into the show. your son created a sound collage for your book?
Yes, I'm super excited about that. In
What
fact,
is this? Talk
we
talk about it. Yeah,
yeah, so
it kinda gets into some of the music dialogue you were just having.
yeah, so I was just sharing with you that I went around most of my life recording odd sounds, and my son for this book, he did. I was like, okay, I want you to put together a sound collage, and he nailed it. I didn't even really have to tell him. It's part of the audio book, so like for people who download it on Audible, and it's on like 30 different. It's on Spotify as well. Uh, but if you hear it, it's got each of the chapters are broken up by this audio sound collage, and it's pretty short, but my son Alistair put that together. And there's a chat. There's the entire part of the book is about legacy, about capturing these most important moments and sharing them and passing them on to not just your family, but to future you. You know,
Right.
you start. There's time. We start hitting record now. 5 years from now, we go back and we mine, and there's something that is super important that we don't even know that we needed. Um, but I was making a joke to Alistair because I did a press release for them when the book went out, and it was like digital creator Alistair Hensley. So he's got a footprint out there in the world now
I love it.
for doing the collage. And he was like, Dad, what the hell does a digital creator mean? I could post something on Facebook. I'm a digital creator. I said, just go with it, man.
Right. That is awesome. That is just so fun. I just you just kind of inspired me on something though, that this idea, going from 2D to I don't know what sound is. It's not quite 3D, might be 4D. It's definitely 3D, but this idea that you can come back to yourself. And so I was actually reading I think it was an article this morning about these families that they have these photos and they don't know what to do with them. And so some families, they take them and they digitize them. Some of them, they give them to like, here, you deal with the box. I don't know what's in this box. There's like 1,000 pictures. It's your problem.
Right,
And other people just throw them out, right? They're just
right,
like, I have no idea what's in the box. We're just going to make the decision. We're going to throw them out. And the article was about the people whose family decided to throw them out. That was what the
oh,
the the underlying piece was, and they were all commenting on how much they missed having that experience. They kind of contrast with the people who didn't throw them out, who got to see like people that that were in their family tree, but they didn't necessarily know. And I think you're right in that even going back 5 years to have a voice chronicle of yourself would be insanely powerful. And to then put the AI lens on that to say, here I was, this is still me 5 years ago. What's new? What's different? How am I doing? Who knows? I think you're right. That's neat.
it's as easy as capturing, storing, and reflecting, and you can do that with a voice recorder on your phone. Now I'm way down the rabbit hole with this. So my digital Kaizen looks like I've got everything going through Omi. It's capturing on Google Workspace. I'm using anti-gravity to feed it into Google Notebook. And I now have a podcast where the two podcasters are debating my life, and I'm bringing in a cognitive expert, a board of directors to kind of and it's crazy, but I could share with you that I've been in tears listening to this before. I'm like, oh my god, it's quite amazing.
Yeah.
But you don't. So I'm not encouraging everybody to go out and do this. Right?
Right.
There is a much easier and simpler method. In fact, the book. The idea is to do something that works for you. So the idea of just the main thing, hit capture, hit record, just start archiving and saving these thoughts. The pictures that you share, the story about the families that shared the pictures. I went through that process when my grandmother died recently, and that's oral history.
Right.
Those pictures, as you start looking through them, it triggers those thoughts of, oh, who's this? What's that about? And you can do that for yourself in your own life by capturing those moments that you didn't know that you needed. Um, and we have time between those thoughts, right?
Right.
It's pretty wild.
I think that's very neat. This has been a lot of fun. This has been a ton of fun. I want to, before we wrap, I want to, one, say thank you, but in particular, I want to invite you to, we have a signature element of our show, the Flip Story Recipe Book, where we invite our guests to share something. It could be an ingredient, it could be a whole method, it could be a full on kind of how to. The goal is that others can kind of take that, they can consume it. Maybe they can flip their own full on life, or they can flip a moment, or they can steal a piece. And so, Chris, I'd like to invite you to share a recipe with us.
Yeah, so I would share the ingredient, the number one main ingredient of the digital Kaizen system is going to be your voice. So that human voice. So capturing the voice, that's the call to action to hit record. Just start hitting record. Hit record on your voice recorder on your phone. Um, you could go as far as doing the wearables, right? In fact, that's changing with the smart glasses and all of this technology is changing. But the idea is just capturing the audio part of it, and then with the voice, it's not just about the audio, it's literally your voice, your meaning. So keeping your meaning in this age of AI, where we have all of these systems converging, and we have that fear of missing out on which one's the greatest and best one, surfacing your most pertinent nuggets of thought, right? Your meaning, boiling that up to the top. That's the idea of digital Kaizen. And so that number one ingredient is voice, finding your voice, sharing your voice, capturing your voice.
Love it. Love it. So, Chris, where can people find the book? Just a
Yeah.
final call out. Go ahead.
Yeah, so for listeners, if this conversation resonated with you today, and what I shared with you, if you wanted to create your own system, that's what the book is. It's more of a deep dive to help you do that. I mentioned earlier it's on Amazon, but I'm a big a proponent of independent bookstores. So if you have to have a tactile version of it, go to your local independent bookstore and request it, and they'll get a copy for you. On the other hand, I'm a little biased towards the audio, so that it's Spotify, it's on Audible, and I feel like that's the way you need to listen to it.
And of course, then you get the sound collage
Yes, yep, that's true.
with the digital creator. I love it.
I love it. I love it.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun to kind of catch up with you, to learn what you've been thinking and your system approach on kind of the whole world of voice and AI. And I just want to say it's just been awesome.
Absolutely, David. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
All right. Well, everyone, we'll see you the next time. All right. Bye for now.